Help in Pharmaceuticals in association with Higher Secondary Principals Forum.
Good day students, welcome to English class. Today we are starting with the new portion for the second formative examination, and the chapter that we are going to cover today is Deep Water. That is the third lesson from your English Flamingo textbook. So let us begin. As you can see the title here and the image, you might have got an idea about what this lesson is about. Before I begin with this particular lesson, I would like you all to just think over and ponder upon a situation where you felt that you have had a drowning experience or a close to drowning experience, where you have felt suffocated or you felt that you are not able to breathe, and how does it feel? Definitely whoever has had such experiences, most of us would have gone to the beach or maybe in the pool where we might have had a close to drowning experience, and all of us know the moment you are unable to breathe, it is a very uncomfortable situation. So just as an exercise for those who have never had a drowning experience, I would suggest just close your nose and catch your breath for as long as you can. Some may be able to catch your breath for like 10 seconds, maybe 20, 30, or maybe some who have practiced maybe for a minute or more. But the moment you feel that your breath is reducing, your oxygen level is reducing, and you are unable to breathe, that discomfort that is experienced is something that is going to be vividly explained in this particular lesson, and how this particular author goes through a very traumatic experience which affects his entire life, and how he overcomes the situation and gets rid of his fear is what we are going to see today. The author of this lesson is William Douglas. He was born in Maine, Minnesota, which is in the United States of America. He graduated with Bachelor's of Arts in two subjects, that is English and Economics. He then spent 2 years teaching in a high school which is in Yakima itself, but however he got tired of doing that, and he realized, or he pursued a legal career. He decided that he wanted to go ahead with a legal career, and during that time he met Franklin D. Roosevelt, who was the 32nd President of the United States, and he became, Douglas, our author, he became an advisor and a friend to the President at that time. This particular lesson that we are studying, it is an excerpt which is taken from Of Men and Mountains by William O. Douglas himself, and it is an autobiographical story supporting discussion of his fear. So here we will see the experience that he had of drowning in a swimming pool, and how that fear was carried forward for a number of years in his life, and how he overcomes this fear and becomes free and can face whatever difficulty he is facing in life. So let's begin. This is William Douglas. Since it is an autobiographical story, the lesson is in first person, where he is narrating the story himself. However, the slides I have put it in a way for you to understand and the story better. So let's begin. It had happened when I was 10 or 11 years old. I had decided to learn to swim. There was a pool at the YMCA in Yakima that offered exactly the opportunity. YMCA is the Young Men's Christian Association, where they provide youngsters and many people who want to learn to swim to come there in the pool and swim. Yakima River was treacherous. Treacherous here means dangerous. I would suggest that all of you keep your textbook open definitely, and the words that are a little new or difficult have been highlighted here, and the meaning of the words have been mentioned in the bracket. So you can note it down on your textbooks itself. Okay, so he describes the Yakima river to be treacherous, which means dangerous, as his mother had continually warned him against it and had kept fresh in mind the details of each drowning in the river. However, the YMCA pool was safe as compared to the Yakima river. It was only 2 to 3 feet deep at the shallow end and 9 feet deep at the other end, and the drop was quite gradual. So this makes the YMCA pool much more safer compared to the Yakima river. The Yakima river looks something like the image over here, and there have been a lot of drowning cases which his mother kept continually reminding him about. And the pool compared to the river obviously seemed like a much safer place for him to go and learn to swim, as the drop was very gradual. So when he went over there the first day, he was all ready. He got a pair of water wings. Water wings are in the image over there, you can see something that helps you to swim and float. He went into the pool. He hated it because he had to show his skinny legs, which he did not like. And yet, you know, as his age is around 10 to 11, any child would be conscious to go there. You're wearing your swimming trunks and you have to show your skinny legs. So at that age, he felt a little conscious to be there. But nevertheless, what he did was he just subdued all his pride. He just kept it in and he said, I have to do it. And so he went ahead and he did it. From the beginning, however, he had an aversion to the water. What is aversion? Aversion is a strong dislike. When you have a strong dislike to something, the word here is aversion. So he had an aversion to the water. Why? What happened? Let us see. This happened when he was around 3 or 4 years old, when he had gone to the beach in California and he was surfing with his father. He actually hung on his father and he was surfing at on the beach, when suddenly a huge wave came in and knocked him out and swept him over. And that was a very, very terrorizing experience to him. Even though it was nothing serious and his father was there with him, his father actually laughed about the situation because he knew he was out of danger. But the whole experience of the wave engulfing him, the overpowering force of the wave actually created a great terror in his heart, which was left in his mind. So when he was introduced to this YMCA pool, it kind of revived all these memories. That is, it brought back, it restored all these unpleasant memories that he had of his childhood or childish fears. And he started thinking about those things. But after a little while, he automatically gathered confidence. He paddled in with his new water wings. He watched all the other boys who were there. He started seeing their movements and he started aping their movements. So he started imitating them by looking at them. And 2 or 3 times, different days, he started doing the same regular thing and he started beginning to feel at ease. So slowly he was getting comfortable with the whole situation, and that is when unfortunately a misadventure happened. Okay, so as he was getting used to the pool and the water, suddenly something happened. What happened? Let us see. So one day he went into the pool when no one else was there. The place was really quiet because no one had reached over there. The water was still and the tiled bottom was as white and clean as that of a bathtub. He was a little scared and timid to go in the water alone. So what he did was he sat at the side of the pool and he waited for the others to come so that he could join in and swim. That is when in came a bruiser of a boy. Bruiser of a boy, kind of a bully who enjoys getting into fights and arguments and who was quite tough and aggressive as a person to look at. They describe him and they say he probably would be around 18 years old and he had thick hair on his chest. He was a beautiful physical specimen. with legs and arms that showed rippling muscles. So this shows that he is physically definitely stronger than the little Douglas. He yelled, "Hi Skinny, how do you like to be ducked?" Okay, ducked meaning how do you want to be dipped in the water. With that, he just picked up Douglas and tossed him into the water. Where did he toss him? In the deep end of the pool, which is much more scarier than the shallow end. He directly landed in a sitting position, swallowed water and went at once to the bottom. He says, "I was frightened but not yet frightened out of my wits. On the way down, I planned." So you see, he was frightened but not so much that he didn't have control over his mind and he didn't know what to do. He was still not frightened out of his wits. So the little intelligence that is required to react to something and plan something, that was still there in him. So he decided and he planned, "When my feet hit the bottom, I would make a big jump, come to the surface, lie flat on it and paddle to the edge of the pool." So this was the plan that he made. Keep it in mind, a question can be asked based on this. This was the plan, but let's see what happened. It seemed a long way down. Those 9 feet that were there in the pool, he actually felt like it was 90. And before he touched the bottom, his lungs were almost ready to burst. But when my feet hit bottom, I summoned all my strength and made what I thought was a great spring upwards. So now, as per his plan, the moment he touched the floor, he had to push himself up. So he decided to do that, and the moment he touched the floor, he thought he gathered all his strength and with all the force he came up. But did he come up in that force? No. Instead, he came very, very slowly. So he says, "I opened my eyes and saw nothing but water. Water that had a dirty yellow tinge to it. I grew panicky. I reached up as if to grab a rope and my hands clutched only at water." So obviously when you are drowning, you are trying to grab onto something, hoping that you will get something to grab on and pull yourself up. But here, he pushed himself up, but he did not come in that force. He was just slowly coming up, and the moment he tried to clutch, he could only get water in his hand. He describes the water to have a yellow tinge here. That could be because of the light. Okay. So he grew panicky. He tried, he did not. He was really suffocating. I tried to yell, but no sound came out. Then my eyes and nose came out of the water, but not my mouth. So he came up to this level, he was out of the water, but his mouth was not out. He tried to scream. If you have any time tried to scream underwater, you would know that the sound would not really be audible outside. It wouldn't come out. You would put in your whole pressure and force and scream, but it wouldn't be coming out actually. So the same thing happened. He tried his best, but unfortunately he just could not. I flailed at the surface of the water. F-L-A-I-L-E-D, that is waving and swinging. He swallowed and choked. I tried to bring my legs up, but they hung as dead weights. He felt really heavy, like his legs were really heavy. He felt paralyzed and rigid. Paralyzed meaning completely unable to move, and rigid, a kind of a stiff kind of position where he just felt that nothing could happen. He just felt trapped and stuck over there where he could not move, he could not do anything. Then a great force was pulling him under. He screamed, but only the water could hear him. Then he says, I had started on the long journey back at the bottom of the pool. So he tried to spring up once, but with all the efforts, nothing happened. He only came up to the level of his nose. His mouth was still underwater, and again he started going down. He struck the water as he went down. Obviously, a person is struggling, he would do whatever is there from his side, make all the attempts to try and come out and save himself and just breathe and stay alive. So he you know, pushed himself, he did all that he could, like how in a nightmare when you are having a really bad dream and in your nightmare there is some kind of irresistible force that is pushing you, how you would struggle to come out of it. The same way for him this was a nightmare kind of situation, but it was actually happening to him and he was anyhow trying to get out of this situation. He says, I had lost all my breath, my lungs ached, my head throbbed. Here there are words. Ached means obviously most of you must be knowing, suffering from some kind of pain. So his lungs were starting to really hurt him, pain him, and his head was throbbing. Throbbed meaning it's like a pulse or the beat that is there. If you are having a really bad headache, sometimes you feel that throbbing feeling, like how the heartbeat is, same way there is like a throbbing in your head which you experience. So all this started happening to him, and again as he felt really tragic in this whole situation, the only thing that said that he was, you know, still struggling was all this throbbing feeling that he had. But still he remembered his strategy. He did not forget his strategy. What was his strategy? I would spring up from the bottom of the pool and come like a cork to the surface. I would lie flat on the water, strike out with my arms and thrash with my legs. Then I would get to the edge of the pool and be safe. So again, C-O-R-K, cork is like a wooden thing, a cork that you have for a bottles and stuff. Those things, they float in the water, right? So he felt like a cork, even he would just bob up and float in the water as light as a cork, and then he would just swim and he would try to reach at the sides somewhere and just grab the sides and feel safe. But did that happen? No. He just went down, down, endlessly. He opened his eyes and he saw nothing but water with the yellow glow, dark water that no one could see through. So he was completely feeling trapped in this particular situation. Sheer stark terror seized him. So complete utter terror, that is that fear had taken over him. It had taken hold of him. He was shrieking, that is he was screaming aloud, but nobody could definitely hear him. There was terror, just complete terror. Terror that knows no understanding, terror that knows no control, terror that no one can understand who has not experienced it. So here he says something, that is, unless you experience such a feeling, you would not understand what it is. It is so traumatizing and it is so terrorizing that there is just terror. There is no understanding, there is no control. You are not able to do anything. You are just captured by that terror. He was shrieking, that is, he was screaming aloud underwater, but definitely nothing happened. He was paralyzed underwater, completely stiff, rigid, and with a lot of fear. Even the screams in his throat were frozen. So he was pushing himself to scream. He was really trying hard to scream, but did it come out? No, it was frozen. He said, only my heart and the pounding in my head, as we were describing it earlier, these were the only things that showed that he was still alive. Moving ahead. And then amidst all this terror came a touch of reason. Again, he reminded himself and he said, I must remember to jump when I hit the bottom. So even though he was struggling all this while, still that small ray of hope, that tiny reason that you want to still live and you still have the strength to attempt, that again comes into him. And he remembers his strategy and he says, all I need to do is jump as soon as I hit the bottom. At last he felt the tiles under him and immediately his toes reached out as if to grab the tiles and he jumped with everything that he had. So the moment his feet touched, his toes touched the tile of the floor, he went as if he wanted to just grab and push himself up, and with all his strength he forced and he jumped and tried to come up. But the jump made absolutely no difference. There was nothing, the water was still around him, and he remembered, he tried to grab onto something as if there was a ladder or a rope or something, but there was nothing, just water, like a mass of yellow water that just held him right over there. Again, stark terror took an even deeper hold on me. Like a great charge of electricity, he was caught into that entire web. He says, I shook and trembled with fright. My arms wouldn't move. My legs wouldn't move. I tried to call for help, for mother. Nothing happened. So he was so terrorized. Imagine a 10 to 11-year-old child underwater, drowning, thinking that he's going to die. He's searching for ladder, rope, cannot get anything. The terror is seizing him so badly. He's trying to scream out for help. He thought he will call out to someone. He felt like calling out to his mother for help. But did anything happen? No. Unfortunately, nothing happened. And then strangely, there was a light. I was coming out of the awful yellow water. At least my eyes were. My nose was also almost out. So he had pushed himself, right? So he was slowly in the process coming out, and he saw the light. His eyes were almost out. Nose was also almost out. But then again, he started down a third time. He sucked for air, but he got water. The yellowish light was now going out. So this was the third time he was again being pulled down by the gravitational force underwater, and he felt like he was getting sucked underwater. Moving ahead. All efforts ceased. Ceased meaning everything was brought to an end. All the efforts that he was putting, all the attempts he was making to come up, all that came to an end. Now he relaxed. Even his legs, it felt limp, and the blackness had completely swept over his brain. He said that he felt like the fear was wiped out. It had even wiped out the terror, the feeling of terror that was there, that was also wiped out. There was no more panic. It was quiet and peaceful. Nothing to be afraid of. Then he says to himself, this is nice, to be drowsy, to go to sleep, no need to jump, too tired to jump. It's nice to be carried gently, to float along in space. Tender arms around me, tender arms like mothers. Now I must go to sleep. So he felt like he was reaching the end. All attempts over, all the efforts that he put, all came to an end. Completely feeling relaxed, completely going into blackness, feeling that the fear that was there was completely wiped out. He did not feel any pain, panic, nothing. He was feeling drowsy and sleepy, and he felt that he was going to sleep. And he felt some tender arms that were gently around him, kind arms holding him. And he remembered his mother again, just like how his mother's arms would be tending to him. And then he says that now I must go to sleep. He says, I crossed to oblivion and the curtain of life fell. Okay? Oblivion in the sense completely unaware, unconscious mode. So he had lost his consciousness entirely, and for him the curtain of life fell, meaning he almost felt like he was dead. The next thing he remembers, he was lying on his stomach and next to the pool, and he was vomiting. The boy, the chap that threw him in, he was saying, "But I was only fooling." Someone who was there, who was helping out, said, "The kid nearly died. Be all right now. Let's carry him to the locker room." So here he got back his consciousness, and the moment he came back, he realized he was next to the pool on his stomach and he was throwing up. And he realized that the boy, the bruiser of a boy who had actually pushed him in, he just did it as a joke, but it almost cost him his life. So the other man was telling him that he almost died, he nearly died. But anyways, they carried him to the locker room. Several hours later, he walked home. He was really weak and trembling, completely shaking. He shook and cried when he was lying on his bed. That night he could not eat. For days, this haunting of fear was there in his heart. The slightest of exertion, any little struggle that he had to do, simple things, that would make him very, very upset. And he would get all wobbly and shaky at the knees, and he would feel sick in his stomach. So any small event that would cause any exertion to him, that he had to even slightly struggle for, he would feel very uncomfortable and very upset. He never went back to the pool, and he completely feared water. He avoided it whenever he could. A few years later, when he came to know about the waters of Cascades, that is some waterfalls that are there in the United States, he wanted to get into them. And whenever he did, or whenever he tried, like wading through the Titan or bumping river, or bathing in the warm lake of the Goat Rocks, these are several places where he would either go there, either to bathe, or he would just be walking through the water. Whatever it was he went to do, anywhere close to any water body, the terror that had seized him in the pool would come back. So the moment he would be in any kind of in the presence of any kind of water body, immediately the same terror came back to him. It would take possession of him completely, and his legs would again become paralyzed. Icy horror would grab my heart. So that intense fear that was there, again it would grab onto him, and he would completely feel paralyzed and feel like that is the end. This handicap stayed with him for years. So many years rolled by, and the same thing stuck onto him. Handicap is some kind of hindrance or something that stops you from doing something. So this stayed with him for years. In canoes on marine lakes, whether it's fishing, any kind of fishing, whether it was freshwater fishing, bass fishing, wherever he went, whatever he did, he just could not get rid of this fear. The haunting fear of water, it followed him everywhere, and it would ruin all of his fishing trips. It deprived him of the joy of canoeing, boating and swimming. So all these fun things that he wanted to do by himself or with the others, he could never do. Whether he wanted to go boating, he wanted to go canoeing, he wanted to go for a fishing trip, he just could not. This fear that was there in him would just overpower him and never stop following him. It was just stuck with him all the time. He used every way possible that he could to overcome this particular fear, but the fear held him firmly in its grip. Finally, one October, he decided to get an instructor and to learn to swim. So he went to the pool. He practiced like 5 days a week, 1 hour every day, and each day for him was like a challenge. The instructor, what he did was, he put a belt around Douglas, and there was a rope attached to the belt which went on an overhead pulley which would take him up and down. Okay, so the rope was attached there, which was attached to him. It was attached to the pulley, and one end of the rope he had to grab, and he had to move up and down in the pool. Okay, so he had to do that, and every time he attempted or every time he tried to do that, a bit of panic kept coming back. It seized him. It would come in between. He was trying to go across the pool, and in between that fear would come. But nevertheless, the rope was there, so that slight confidence was there to go on and do this. In between, his legs would freeze, or he would again not be able to do anything. It was 3 months before the tension actually started slacking off. Okay, that is, it kind of reduced. Then the instructor taught him to put his face underwater and exhale, and come up and inhale. For any person who is learning to swim, this is a very important technique, so that they can have control over their breath and they can swim for a longer time with this breathing technique. So he practiced that a lot. The instructor helped him to practice that a lot. So he had to raise his nose, inhale, then put his face underwater, exhale. Every time he went underwater, that panic would come back again. But bit by bit, he started shedding this panic. So when he went underwater, little by little, his fear was reducing. The next thing that the instructor taught him was, he took him to the side of the pool and he taught him to kick with his legs. If you have learned swimming, or if you have seen someone learn swim, these are the basic things that you learn. So he was taught to kick his legs. For weeks he just did this, kicking with his legs. At first his legs completely refused to work, because obviously he had such a bad experience and he was feeling rigid and paralyzed. So even here initially his legs just did not work. But they gradually relaxed, and finally he had command over them. So over the period of time, slowly he relaxed and everything went on smoothly. So once this was done, piece by piece, this instructor had built a swimmer out of Douglas. And when he had perfected each piece, it was all put together into an integrated whole. So all these different things that were taught to him, all that was put together, and he had to swim like a normal swimmer. And around in April, Douglas, the instructor, said, "Now you can swim. Dive off and swim the length of the pool, crawl stroke." Okay? And Douglas did it. The instructor was finished. So finally he actually swam across the pool without any problem, and he completed it very well, and the instructor was finished. Moving on, now we come to the last part of the lesson. The instructor was finished, but Douglas was not finished. He wanted that fear to be completely gone, and he wondered whether that terror would come back to him if he was alone in the pool. And he tried it. He swam the length up and down, and when he did so, tiny vestiges of the old terror would return. Tiny vestiges meaning small remainders of the error. Little bit what was left in him, it would just come and terrorize him in between. But now he could just frown and say to that terror, "Trying to scare me, eh? Well, here's to you, look." And off he would go for another length of the pool. So he had built in that ability and that confidence to actually look in the face of the terror and say, "You are trying to scare me? You see, I can do it even if you try to scare me." This went on till July, and still he was not satisfied. He still had that thing in him to make sure, 100% sure, whether that terror has completely left him or not. So then he went to Lake Wentworth in New Hampshire, dived off a dock at Triggs Island, and swam 2 miles across the lake to Stamp Act Island. So he kept on increasing his challenges. Now he dived in from a dock and he swam across for 2 miles, imagine, for 2 miles, and he reached to the stamp-packed island. He swam, he used all the strokes that he had learned, crawl stroke, breaststroke, side stroke, backstroke. He tried everything and he completed it. Only once that terror had come back to him again, it had returned. That was when he was right in the middle of the lake. He had put his face under, and when he looked under, he saw nothing but bottomless water. Obviously, that is a very, very scary feeling. Imagine yourself in the middle of the lake and you put your head underwater and you just see bottomless water there. That would be a very scary experience for anyone. And he purposely put himself in that situation to make sure that the terror does not come back. And the old sensation did return in miniature, slightly. I laughed and said, "Well, Mr. Terror, what do you think you can do to me?" And the terror that was there, it fled, it ran away, and he swam on. So every time he took this up as a challenge, he actually vocally spoke to the terror, which made him more confident, and he realized that he does have control and he can overcome this fear and this terror. Yet, in spite of doing this, he had a residual doubt, that is slight leftover doubt in him. So at the first opportunity, he hurried west. He went up to the Conrad Meadows, up to the Conrad Creek trail to meet Glacier, and camped in the high meadows by the side of Warm Lake. Okay, so in the US, these particular meadows he went to, there was a lake over there, so he went, climbed up, hiked, went, had all the adventure that he could, and he went near the Warm Lake. The next morning, what he did, he stripped, dived into the lake, swam across to the other shore and came back. So he swam across to the other shore and he came back just as Doug Corcoran used to. Doug Corcoran is a eminent personality in Yakima who had actually done all these things. So he had this adventurous trip and he successfully completed this entire thing. So the same way, even he camped, he swam across and came back and did all this by himself. And this gave him that exhilarating feeling. I shouted with joy and the Gilbert Peak returned the echo. So what he said, it echoed back to him. I had conquered my fear of water. So finally, he had overcome his fear of water and he has been successful by completing whatever things that he had thought in his mind. As he built up his challenges, he still very well successfully overcame all these issues and completed all his challenges, and he successfully conquered his fear of water. This particular experience had a very, very deep meaning to him, and even we can learn a lot from Douglas's experience. What he says here is, only those who have known the stark terror and conquered it can appreciate it. So only a person who has actually felt this terror grasping them and has overcome this terror and conquered it, only they will be able to appreciate this. What he says is, in death there is peace. There is terror only in the fear of death itself. So what he says is that in death there is peace, definitely. If you compare it to the time he was drowning, you remember towards the end he had actually eased down. He felt that things were getting peaceful and he was feeling relaxed. So that is a slight comparison to what he means to say by saying that in death there is peace. Obviously, once there is death, there is peace. But there is terror only in the fear of death. So that fear, when it is there, that you feel you're going to die and you have no control, like when he was drowning, that was when he was terrorized, when he felt that he was going to die. That fear was with him. That is what caused the terror. And then he quoted what Roosevelt said. That is, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. This was said by the President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who was the President of the United States. He said that all we have to fear is fear itself. So the only thing that creates fear in us is fear itself. If you don't have that fear, you can obviously overcome and do whatever you want and achieve whatever you wish to. Because, he says, I had experienced both the sensation of dying and the terror that fear of it can produce, the will to live somehow grew in intensity. So he had both these experiences, that is, the sensation of dying and the terror it can actually cause. Both these experiences he had. But because of these experiences, the will to live, it actually increased, improved in intensity. And at last, William Douglas actually felt released. That is because he was free to walk the trails and climb the peaks and to brush aside the fear. So finally, he was released from all his terror and fear. Now he could just walk ahead, do whatever he wanted, have fun either by himself or with the people around him, take up different adventures and complete it without having this fear at the back of his head. So the fear that was gripping him had completely moved aside. It was brushed aside and he could live a complete life. So this definitely teaches all of us also a lesson where we need to work on our fears. We need to move ahead in life. We need to overcome the fears that are stopping us, that is terrorizing us and stopping us from achieving things that we have set our mind to. No matter in which situation, it may not be the fear of water, it could be a fear of anything, fear of anything that you want to achieve in your life. No matter what, this experience of William Douglas teaches us that any fear, you can overcome it, no matter how difficult it seems. And we need to work on it and push ourselves to overcome the fear that we face. So let's just summarize what we learnt in this lesson. Deep Water is basically about the writer's journey of overcoming the fear of water, which was deeply rooted in him since childhood. The author starts fearing water around the age of say 3 or 4. It begins when he visits California with his father. He visits a beach where a wave knocks him down and sweeps over him. Although the father laughs at this, knowing there was no danger, this experience actually terrifies the author. This experience develops a fear of water in him, and after that, when the author is 10 or 11 years old, he experiences another incident which escalates his fear which was already there. Ahead we see he is at a swimming pool in Yakima, that is in the YMCA pool, trying to learn swimming. And one fine day, a bully, the big bruiser of a boy, he decides to pull a dangerous prank. So he just pushes him in the deep end of the pool, which completely frightens the author. He reaches 9 feet into the water and starts struggling desperately to hold on to something. Moreover, he yells for help, but he starts feeling paralyzed and he felt only his heart and the throbbing in his head. Then he gives up. He slowly relaxes and he just gives up. But then he wakes up at the side of the pool when he thought everything was over. Suddenly, the next thing he remembers, he wakes up at the side of the pool and he's vomiting and he's finally realized that he's still alive. However, the terror he experiences while drowning, it never goes away. It continues to haunt him for many, many years and even spoils his future expeditions like canoeing, swimming, fishing, and many more. He even visits marine lakes, Columbia, New Hampshire, and more, and many more. but he's not able to enjoy it. As we have already seen, the terror was still after him. So he decides to overcome this fear anyhow, and he enrolls himself in a swimming class and tries to learn from an instructor. So the instructor teaches him many tips and tricks for swimming, which helped him a lot. So he begins with the inhaling and exhaling. Then he practices that for a lot of weeks. Finally, he gets comfortable. Further, he moves on to the kicking of the legs on the side of the pool. And finally, with all this combined, all the combination, he moves on to become a swimmer. So he finally swims. Although the author knows how to swim, he was still terrified of water. And so, in order to get rid of the fear, he decides to confront it. So he mocks it, he puts up all the challenges, he does whatever he felt like doing, and he mocks it by thinking, what can it really do? What can the fear do? Nothing. It will just keep him in a terrorized, scared zone. But what can it do? Nothing. Consequently, he plunges into the water, and to his surprise, his fear just goes away. So he faced it in many places, and at last he manages to conquer it. Finally, he has conquered his fear. So to sum up in this lesson, we learn that if we are determined enough and if we have the courage, we can overcome any fear that comes our way without letting the fear overpower us. So this is a summary. Moving on to the question and answers, I've just put up some important questions that are commonly asked. The first one here is, why was Douglas frightened to swim in the Yakima River? And the answer can be written something like this. The Yakima River was treacherous, it was very dangerous. Besides, his mother continually warned against it and kept fresh in his mind the details of each drowning in the river. So that is the reason that Douglas was frightened to swim in the Yakima River. Another question that can be asked, why did Douglas choose the YMCA pool to learn to swim? So the YMCA pool was only 2 to 3 feet deep at the shallow end and 9 feet deep at the other end, and the drop was gradual. So it appeared much more safer than the Yakima River itself, and hence Douglas chose to learn swimming there. Third question, why was William Douglas determined to overcome his fear of water? So why was he determined to overcome his fear of water? We have seen, right? Douglas was really determined to overcome his fear of water because he could not enjoy all the things that he wanted to. That is fishing, swimming, boating, canoeing. He was deprived of all the joys of doing all these activities. So because of that, he anyhow wanted to overcome his fear. What plans did Douglas make to save himself when he was thrown into the pool? So remember, when he was thrown into the pool, he had made a plan in his mind to save himself. What was that? So Douglas had decided that when his feet would hit the bottom, he would make a big jump, come to the surface, lie flat and paddle to the end of the pool. So this was his plan. Next question, how did Douglas develop an aversion for water? Why was he having this fear for water? So what happened was, Douglas was once knocked down by the waves at California Beach, that you do remember, right? When he was 3 to 4 years old, when he went with his father. That was one bad experience, where the waves swept over him and he was buried under them. So the overpowering force of water terrorized him, and that is why he had developed aversion to it. And later, obviously, there were more experiences. There was another major experience, but that does not need to be included here, because why he developed the aversion was because of this initial experience that he had with his father. Another question, how does Douglas overcome his fear of water? So what all did he do to overcome his fear of water? The haunting fear of water followed Douglas in every fishing trip, swimming, boating and canoeing. So to get rid of this fear, he finally engaged an instructor who taught him 5 days a week, an hour each day. So he held one end of the rope and the other end was at the pulley overhead of Douglas, which helped him to move up and down, which gave him the confidence at least to swim. How did the instructor build a swimmer out of William Douglas? So what did this instructor do? The instructor, similar answer, the instructor had tied a rope which was connected to a pulley overhead and an overhead cable to Douglas's belt and made him swim up and down the pool. So he taught Douglas also to inhale and exhale. Then he made him hold the side of the pool and practice kicking with his legs till he could command over it. So all these little things that the instructor taught him helped him to become a swimmer. And one last question, what is the misadventure that William Douglas speaks about? So you will have to overall give an idea of what is the misadventure that he speaks about. So William O. Douglas had just learnt swimming. One day an 18-year-old big bruiser picked him up and tossed him into the 9 feet deep end of the YMCA pool. So he hit the water surface in a sitting position and he swallowed a lot of water and went to the bottom. So he nearly died in this misadventure. You can always add on your own points and make this answer even more better and vivid. And yes, that's the end of the lesson. So hope you all have understood. Study well and all the best. Thank you.
Prudent Scholars, powered by Lupin Pharmaceuticals.